Hi class, welcome to our third video on stress and constructive coping strategies. And in this video, we're going to be looking at some more constructive coping strategies. Before we do, I'd like to give you a chance to test yourself. The questions that I'm going to be asking you come from what you've learned already in this chapter. So let's look at the first one. Khalid is a psychology major who's about to graduate after the fall semester. Since he'll be taking the GRE, which is a test to get into graduate school, it stands for the Graduate Record Exam, and applying to graduate school starting in October, he's taking on extra shifts and saving as much money as possible this summer. What type of coping strategy is Khalid using? Is it emotion focused, meaning focused, problem focused, or proactively focused? If you're not sure of the answer, go back and look at your notes. You can pause the video. If you are sure, then just allow the video to play. If you chose problem-focused coping, you're right. Problem-focused coping basically hands you the facts and lets you approach the problem head-on. It's bypassing all of the emotion and analyzing that comes with emotion, and it gets straight to the point. And so you're facing the problem head-on. And Khalid is wanting to solve the problem of making sure that he has enough money for when he goes on to school. Let's try another one. Which of the following statements is the most accurate reflection of current research findings on catharsis theory? If you don't remember what catharsis is, go back and take a look at your notes. You can go back and look at the book, and this is something that was described in an earlier video for this chapter. Is it behaving aggressively is an effective manner of blowing off steam? Is it behaving aggressively tends to fuel more anger and aggression? Is it that behaving aggressively or passive aggressively discharges pent-up emotions most effectively? Or behaving aggressively towards a person completely unrelated to your aggression is most effective? If you selected that B, behaving aggressively tends to fuel more anger and aggression, you're right. Remember, although catharsis may on the surface sound like a good thing, perhaps for some of you, you think it's a good idea to just blow off steam. I think I remember hearing this phrase as I've grown up, and I've heard family members say comments or make comments about blowing off steam as though it's the right thing to do. And so I wonder if this phrase being fairly commonplace in our society is a reflection of how many people may view this idea of blowing off steam as a good thing. But the research actually says that it may fuel more anger and aggression. Here's another one. Jose received his organic chemistry midterm back in class, and he earned 1 point out of 25 possible. A classmate asked how he did on the midterm, and Jose remarked, "At least I didn't spell my name wrong." Jose is using blank to cope with his poor grade. Is Jose engaging in catastrophic thinking, positive reinterpretation, aggressive humor, or benefit finding? If you selected positive reinterpretation, you're correct. What Jose is doing is he's reframing the initial negative thought. So if you weren't sure about what this is, then be sure to go back and take a look at this in your notes. In particular, you might want to look at some of the constructive approaches we can take that revolve around cognition. Here's another one. Actively seeking help is viewed, blank, as an annoyance by European Americans, as a disruption of group harmony by collectivistic cultures, as a useful strategy by Asian Americans, or as an effective or ineffective strategy by most individualistic cultures. If you're not sure of the answer, again, go back and take a look at your notes or your textbook. And we did discuss this in an earlier video. The correct answer is as a disruption of group harmony by collectivistic cultures. Remember, we can't make generalizations about one individual from a particular culture. We don't want to say that because our friend is Asian that she's not likely to seek help. That's an unfair generalization. It is important for us to remember that each of us are individuals and we each have our own individual unique experiences. However, we do find in research that there are some common threads among cultures. And for example, among collectivistic cultures, there is a reduced tendency to seek help. And when we think about collectivistic cultures, we're talking about cultures that tend to value group goals over individual goals, who are more concerned with the community and family and how what individuals do impacts those groups, whether it be how things impact your mother, your father, your neighbors, the larger community within which you live, than how things impact yourself. And so they're less inclined to be concerned with personal goals, more concerned with group goals. And so you would find that some examples of collectivistic cultures can be found in much of Southern Europe, very collectivistic cultures throughout many countries in Asia. You'll also find many places in North Africa that there is high collectivism. And in the United States, we do tend to be pretty high in individualism. We'll be looking more at collectivism and individualism in future modules. So the correct answer here again is B, a disruption of group harmony by collectivistic cultures. So what are you going to be learning in our last video? Well, by the end of this video, you're going to have a good understanding of the nature and value of emotional intelligence. You're also going to be able to analyze the adaptive value of expressing emotions and regulating emotions. You're also going to be able to discuss the importance of managing hostility and forgiving the transgressions of others. You'll also be able to understand how exercise can foster improved emotional functioning and summarize the evidence on the adaptive value of meditation, relaxation, and spirituality. I provided you with some very helpful links under the supplementary resources section of Chapter 4 for this module. I'd encourage you to take a look at these resources. There's some great links on relaxation techniques and strategies, and some resources to help you to manage stress. So let's get started. Let's get started by looking at emotional intelligence. This is the ability to perceive and express emotion, to use emotions to facilitate thought, and to understand and reason with emotion and to regulate emotion. As you think about this definition, I'd ask you to ask yourself, do you think that emotional intelligence is as important as IQ? Do you think that it's more important than IQ? And why do you think the way that you do? In what areas of your life has emotional intelligence been important? And in what ways do you think you could improve your own emotional intelligence? While there's considerable variation regarding how people view the value of emotional intelligence in contrast to IQ, many people view emotional intelligence, or what we could also call EQ, as more important than IQ in attaining success in their lives and in their careers. So as individuals, our success and the success of all of us in different professions, and you who are going to be moving into your chosen career, depend upon your ability to read the emotions of others, to read the signals of other people, and to react appropriately to them. I think this is especially true for each of us who are interested in the helping profession. So if you are going to be working directly with people, which probably most of you are, even if you're not a psychology major or you're not majoring in a related field, this skill is of particular importance, but it's also important in so many other fields. Because emotional intelligence is so important, each of us needs to develop mature emotional intelligence skills that allow us to better understand others, to empathize, and to negotiate with other people. And I think this is especially true because our economy and world has become much more global. We're needing to learn to interact with people who are very different from us, who have very different backgrounds from us. And this requires a lot of flexibility. It also requires us to be able to manage stressors better. It can be very frustrating when we feel like people don't understand our own values or where we stand on certain issues. And because of social media and because of just the overall increase in communication, we have more and more opportunities for there to be some of these negative experiences and interactions. And so we have to learn how to manage those emotions and regulate how we feel and to help other people to really know how we feel in a very healthy way and then to understand the emotions of others as well. When we think about emotional intelligence, we can think of it as having four very important components. The first one is accurately perceiving emotions in yourself and in others. So let's start with self-awareness, understanding yourself. So when you understand yourself, you are able to recognize an emotion as it is happening. And this is a key component to emotional intelligence. This is where you have a ability to fine tune your true feelings, to tune into your true feelings and to fine tune them so that they're not distracted by all of the other things about you and your own perhaps insecurities and your history that may impact how you are feeling and coming across. So if you can evaluate your emotions, if you can accurately perceive your emotions, you are better able to manage them. So emotional self-awareness is very important when it comes to emotional intelligence. Understanding or accurately perceiving the emotions in others involves empathy. It involves the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. So this is involving your ability to recognize how people feel. And this is an important component to success in your life and in your academic experiences and eventually in your career. And the more skillful that you are in discerning the feelings behind the signals that others give you, the better you can respond to the signals that that you're receiving from them, and the better you can control the signals that you send them. So you're going to be, when you're able to perceive the emotions of other people, you're able to anticipate the emotions of others as well. You're also able to cultivate opportunities through diverse people. So you seek out experiences with people who have diverse backgrounds so that you have experience in accurately perceiving emotions. And I think it's also important for us to have political awareness, for us to be able to read a group's emotional currents and different power relationships. When we think about political awareness, I'm not talking about your position on a particular political issue, whether you're leaning to the right or leaning to the left, but where you have a sense of the politics within the group that you are navigating. And so having that ability can be extremely helpful in helping you to build that emotional intelligence, and it's an important part of an ability to perceive the emotions in others. Also important to emotional intelligence is knowing how your emotions shape your thinking. So it's important that when we want to have a development of emotional intelligence, as we're working on this, we need to regularly question our thoughts within the context of our emotional experience. Such questions might involve things like, am I feeling this way because, or am I thinking this way because of how I'm feeling anxious? Am I thinking this way because I am frustrated? Would I be thinking differently if I wasn't feeling frustrated? So really thinking about how your emotions are affecting your thinking, that should become a regular habit. Also, the ability to understand complex and contradictory emotions. Emotions are not always straightforward and they're not always cut and dry and easy to fully understand. But over time, we can begin to understand the complexity of our own emotions and those of others, and that we are, as humans, likely to experience on a daily basis complex emotions. And so being able to understand the complexity of those types of experiences, that yes, we can be frustrated, but we can also feel happy. We can be anxious, but we can also be feeling a sense of anticipation and excitement. So sometimes emotions may seem contradictory, and we need to be able to understand that. And then regulation of emotions is so important. And so we often have little control over when we experience emotions, but we do have some say in how long an emotion will last by using many different techniques that are available to us that can help to alleviate negative emotions like anger and anxiety and depression. So these types of techniques that we might employ could be reinterpreting events, and we've looked at that. So really recasting a situation in a different light, in a more positive light. It might also involve just taking a long walk, meditating, prayer. It could be counting to 10 or counting to 100. I think that Thomas Jefferson said something to the effect that when you're angry, count to 10 before you speak, and if very angry, count to 100. So regulating our emotions is very important, and there are some very easy strategies that we can employ. And over time, we can make these into habits. I think it's so important that if you are working with children or if you have children, to help them to develop these skills. Emotional regulation is so important, and it's not only important socially, it's not only important in terms of long-term consequences, but even academically. If we can regulate our emotions, then we don't have to put as much cognitive or as many cognitive resources into managing our feelings as we would otherwise. And we can instead use our cognitive resources for learning. So it's very helpful to have this ability. Overall, as I've shared with you, the benefits of emotional intelligence or EQ are numerous. And people who have a high level of emotional intelligence, according to the research, they experience better social interactions. And this is important because this then can serve as a source of social support. So it seems to be a cycle of benefit that one experiences. They're also more inclined to enjoy better mental and physical health, and they are more effective leaders. And they're more likely to use problem-focused coping strategies to deal with anxiety. And in contrast, at work, low emotional intelligence is linked with burnout. So some very interesting benefits. I'm going to put under our supplementary resources section for this chapter a very good resource on how to enhance your emotional intelligence. So when we have high levels of emotional intelligence, we are good not only at regulating or controlling how we express our emotions to others, but we're good at regulating our own emotional experience. It is very normal to feel angry and upset, but of course it is not healthy to express that anger or direct that anger outwards, or to hold that anger inside. We need to find healthy ways of handling those uncomfortable emotions. And in terms of stress and in terms of the physiological effects of suppressing anger, when people attempt to actively suppress these emotions like anger, this tends to increase stress and physiological arousal. Now think about the consequences of this. If we are frequently doing this, this then serves as a chronic stressor, which can then have negative health consequences because over time, our body adapts to that increased level of sympathetic nervous system arousal, which can lead to an increase in blood pressure, therefore increase hypertension. So we're talking about When we think about blood pressure, we're talking about hypertension. And when we think about the effects of this can have some significant effects on our overall health. Also, an increased risk in having high circulating stress hormone levels. And we know when that happens, that's an increase in the likelihood of inflammation, decreased immune responses, increased circulating blood sugar levels, which can lead to more moodiness. So finding ways to manage those internal emotions that we have, these are very important goals we should each set for ourselves. Emotional disclosure, being able to talk with others about how we feel, is associated with a better mood, more positive self-perceptions, and better physical and mental health. Oftentimes, though, I want to say that when we think about emotional disclosure, this certainly requires vulnerability, a sense that we can trust other people. And if you think about personality development, you think about early life experiences, if we have had experiences early in our life where we've learned that we can't trust others, this can be difficult. And so if we're finding difficulty in disclosing our feelings to others, it might be beneficial to seek therapy so that we can learn to have that trust in other people and at least temporarily have someone that we can disclose our feelings to. I also want to point out that emotional disclosure requires being aware of one's own emotions. So we have to be able to be self-aware. And so being self-aware requires that we are introspective, that we take the time to think about how we're feeling and why we're feeling the way that we are. It also requires that we have someone to talk to. And this might require that if, let's say, you have social anxiety or some or perhaps even generalized anxiety, you might be less inclined to express how you're feeling because you might worry about what other people are going to be thinking about you. And so again, this may then be the time for you to think about seeking therapy, to talk with someone about this. Remember, it's so important that if you are experiencing mild to moderate symptoms of anxiety or depression or stress is somewhat bothering you, it's so much better for you to, if you can, to seek therapy at that point rather than to wait until it becomes unbearable. Of course, you can receive great benefit when it becomes unbearable, but why wait? Why not seek that help? Forgiveness is such an important coping strategy. It's such an important gift that each of us can give to ourselves and to others. And whether it's just a simple disagreement with your partner, or maybe it's a long held resentment that you have towards a family member or a friend, unresolved conflict can go much deeper than you may realize. It can seriously be affecting your physical health. But the act of forgiveness can have huge rewards for your health. It actually, according to research, can lower your risk of heart attack. It can improve your cholesterol levels and sleep. It can reduce pain and blood pressure. It can reduce levels of anxiety and depression, and it can also reduce levels of stress. And it turns out that over time, as we each get older, that there's an increase in the forgiveness health connection, meaning that the benefits of forgiveness continue to grow and get even stronger and better. So is forgiveness just about saying the words like, I forgive you? No, it's not. It really is an active process where you're making a conscious decision to let go of negative feelings. And this is whether the person who you're giving this forgiveness to or you're forgiving is deserving or not. It is an opportunity for you to release the anger, release resentment, to remove that hostility. And when you do this, you begin to feel empathy, you begin to feel compassion, and you may even begin to feel affection for that person who has wronged you. As I'm saying this, there may be some of you who feel that it's really hard to forgive people for certain things, and it absolutely can be. And this may not be something that you feel you can do on your own. It may, again, be helpful for you to seek therapy if you find that holding on to that anger and resentment is having an effect on your overall well-being. And it turns out that some people actually are just naturally more forgiving. And you know what's so interesting about these people is that they do tend to be more satisfied with their lives, and they have less depression, they have less anxiety, less stress, less anger, and hostility. And people who tend to hang on to grudges and hold on to that anger, they're more likely to experience severe depression and post-traumatic stress disorder and other conditions. And I want to point out that if you have depression, that does not mean, of course, that it's because you're not forgiving someone. But when someone isn't forgiving others, that can increase that risk for severe depression. So even though if you're naturally inclined to hold on to grudges and you find it really difficult to let go of those, you can train yourself to act in healthier ways. So it's not as though you are stuck within uh, natural that natural way or predisposition that you have, that natural way of being. So, if you work on the skill of forgiveness, you are actively thinking about forgiving and you are practicing forgiving. And this could be in small things, starting with very small things. It could even be that this is something that is significant for you, and you might want to think back at behavior modification as we've learned about behavior modification and you learned about shaping. You might find that you want to be able to forgive someone who's done something to you in your life, and it's a pretty big thing. Well, jumping from zero of not being able to forgive very easily the transgressions of others where they have very minor transgressions to that big event or thing that that person has done, that could be a pretty big leap. So you might want to think about intermediate goals, and that goes back to that concept of shaping. Overall, we just want to think of forgiveness as being a choice. What you're doing is you're choosing to offer compassion and you're choosing to offer empathy to another person. Exercise can also be very beneficial for reducing stress. And of course, regular exercise can have an overall physical effect on your body by improving your health, but it also can cause mental benefits. And these benefits have a neurochemical basis. So exercise reduces levels of the body's stress hormones that you learned about. You learned about adrenaline and cortisol. So exercise reduces the levels of these hormones. It also stimulates the production of endorphins, and these are chemicals in the brain that many of you know about that are the body's natural painkillers and mood elevators. They're responsible for the runner's high that some of you may have had, and for the feelings of relaxation or optimism that you may have had when you've had a long or intense workout. Exercise also provides you with the opportunity to get away from it all and to enjoy some solitude and to, of course, make friends and build social networks, which we know can be very important also in helping to manage stress. Almost any type of exercise can be beneficial, so there's not one that is the most ideal. A lot of people find that exercises that involve large muscle groups in a very rhythmic fashion seem to be very helpful and beneficial. So if you've ever, and probably many of you have been on an elliptical machine, I know I really like using an elliptical machine. And I think one of the reasons people tend to like it is because it does have that rhythmic, regular, or repetitive movement that we could even almost think of as a form of muscular meditation. Also, other types of exercises that can be extremely helpful is walking and running, so you don't have to have a gym membership. Really, any physical activity can be very helpful in reducing stress. Let's now take a look at meditation. I know that there are many people within my family who are from older generations who are likely to associate meditation with ancient Eastern religion. And actually, meditation does not need to be, nor is it necessarily associated with any particular religion. A person could be religious or non-religious, and they don't need to be of any particular religion in order to experience the benefits of meditation, or of course, to meditate. So meditation is really a very simple technique. And if you practice meditation for just as little as 10 minutes a day, this can help to control your stress levels, decrease anxiety, improve your heart health, and allow you to have an even greater capacity for relaxation. Now, meditation has been practiced for thousands of years, but there is a particular approach that's called the relaxation response, and it was developed in the 1970s by a physician at Harvard. And this particular approach has actually gained acceptance by physicians and therapists all around the world as a way of reducing or relieving some of the symptoms of physical health conditions ranging from cancer to AIDS. So as you'll remember from all we've talked about, when we are exposed to a sudden stress or threat, we respond with the fight or flight response. And this results in an increase in adrenaline and cortisol and other hormones that are part of that stress response. And when this happens, we also experience an increase in blood pressure, pulse rate, breathing rate, and blood flow to our muscles. We know that, yes, this is great when we have an acute stress response, but in the long term, if this acute stress becomes chronic, it can have very significant effects on our overall health, as it can lead to an overall higher level of things like blood pressure and overall circulating stress hormones, which can then lead to increased inflammation and decreased immunity. So this particular response that I mentioned just now that was developed in the 1970s, it actually is a technique that was designed to cause the body to respond in an opposite way to the fight or flight response. So it really has the goal of eliciting a state of deep relaxation where our breathing, our pulse rate, our blood pressure, and our metabolism are decreased. Now, when I say metabolism are decreased, some of you might be thinking, oh no, I don't want my metabolism to go down. We're not talking about all day permanently. We're talking about at that moment. And keep in mind, when you have high levels of cortisol that you're having because of stress, that actually can cause you to store more fat, and it can make it harder for you to resist sweets and carbohydrates, which then of course can lead to weight gain. So it really is to your benefit to reduce that stress response. And when we do this, if we can, like I said, 10 minutes a day, do this meditation, you can, and you achieve this state of relaxation, you can find that you can experience an increase in your mood, lower blood pressure, your digestion can improve, and just an overall reduction of everyday stress. And this is so important when we consider the negative effects of stress. So what is this relaxation response technique? Well, what it consists of is it consists of repeatedly saying a particular word or a sound or a phrase. It could be anything that's of meaning to you. So you're repeatedly saying some word or a sound or a phrase that has some special meaning to you. And you're doing this while you're sitting quietly and you have good posture and your eyes are closed for 10 to 20 minutes. You need to make sure you're doing this in a quiet place that's free of distractions, and it's better for you to sit than it is to lie down. I know for myself, if I am not sitting, then I will fall asleep. And it's very easy for this to happen because you're in this relaxed state. You also, at the same time, want to relax your muscles, starting with your feet and then progressing up to your face. And as you're doing this, breathe through your nose in a very free and natural way. Now, while you're doing this, and this does take practice, okay, because it is our inclination when we are wanting to relax and not think about anything to begin to think about something. It's hard to get thoughts out of our mind. So again, we need to repeat that word, and that can help to remove those intrusive thoughts. So when we're doing this, intruding worries or thoughts, you want to try and ignore those, or at least dismiss them to the best of your ability, and just continue focusing on that sound or that word or phrase. You don't have to have your eyes closed. You can have them open. If they are, just try to focus on one thing that's in the room so that you're not distracted. So, and also you don't want to look at a clock to, consider how long you've been doing this. You don't want that to be your distraction. So make sure that you are, you're not focusing on a clock. Now, every now and then, maybe you would need to double check, but it shouldn't be something you're frequently looking at. And you don't want to set an alarm, because that can be very jolting. And it would be, if imagine you're in this relaxed state and the alarm goes off. So as you're doing this, you're in this very deep, relaxed state. You're restating that phrase, that word, that sound, getting rid of those intrusive thoughts, removing them from your mind. And once you're done, you want to stay seated. And then you want to gradually open your eyes, and then you want to allow thoughts to return that are related to your everyday life. And you want to do so gradually. So this is a very interesting approach. It's very helpful, very well supported by research, really easy to do. And think of it like practicing anything. Anything that you want to learn, you have to practice each day. And the more you practice, the better you become and the more benefits you see from it. So just 10 minutes a day, you can do it. I would encourage you to try doing this. And again, this is called the relaxation response technique. If you want to look this up or find any YouTube videos to help guide you through this. I'll also place a link to this relaxation response on our supplementary resources link that's under Chapter 4 in this module. And I'd encourage you, if you come across any really good videos or links, send them to me or just send them out to the class. This is a very easy way to promote relaxation in your everyday life and reduce stress, and overall have or experience the positive benefits of something very simple. Spirituality can also be an effective means of coping with stress. So first, what is spirituality? Well, spirituality has many definitions, but at its core, it helps to give context to your life. And it's not necessarily connected to a specific belief system or even, for some people, religious worship. Instead, it's coming from your connection with yourself and with others, and the development of a personal value system and your search for meaning in life. For many of you, for many of us, it takes the form of religious observance. It would include prayer. It may include meditation or a belief in a higher power. So there's no particular religion that we would say is aligned with spirituality more so than another. We could be of any religion. And for some people, it may not be a particular religion. It might be found in nature or in art or through a secular community. So spirituality is different for everyone. Spirituality is linked to better physical and mental health. And when we think about the coping process, spirituality contains such features as reappraisal, forgiveness. It can often include meditation and social support. So you might wonder, how specifically can spirituality reduce stress? Well, of course, we have these components that I have listed here, but I also want to point out here that having a sense of purpose can help to clarify what's most important to you. And then you're better able to focus on what is important and focus less on what's unimportant. And this can help to eliminate stress. Sometimes we may be focusing on too many things or unimportant things. Also, spirituality, I think, can help us to have a connection to the world. It can lead us to feel that we are not alone and recognize we're not alone. And it can cause a sense of inner peace during difficult times. Two, I think it's important for us to consider how when a person is spiritual, it can cause a person to release that sense of holding on to control. So you, as a spiritual person, are going to be more likely to feel like you're a part of a greater whole, that you realize you aren't responsible for everything that happens in life. You can share the burden of tough times and the joys of life's blessings with those who are around you. Spirituality, as I've listed here too, with social support, can help to improve or expand your social network. And we know how important a social network is in reducing stress. Spirituality can also improve our health choices. People who consider themselves to be spiritual may be, they're oftentimes making health choices that are related to their faith. And there are many religions or religious groups. And remember, spirituality is not directly tied to religion necessarily, but there are many religious groups whose diet is very affected by their religion. I think of, for example, the Seventh-day Adventists, and I encourage you to learn about their eating habits. There's a great book, it's called The Blue Zones, and in this book, the author explores the people around the world who live the longest. And there are some people who live in California who live a very long time, much longer than average. And they are one of those 7 groups, and many of them are Seventh-day Adventists. And it's suggested that they're living longer because they're eating simpler foods, whole foods, and they are vegetarians. And of course, we know that there are many faiths around the world that promote vegetarianism as well, and that promote fasting. And we know fasting can actually have some significant health benefits. So there's lots of benefits to spirituality. So what have you learned? Well, you've learned that emotional intelligence has significant value and that emotional expression is important in reducing the negative effects of stress. You've also learned about the importance of forgiveness, and you learned about how forgiveness has very positive effects on health, and that holding on to hostility and anger can be very detrimental to our health and well-being. You learned too about exercise and its benefits. You also learned about meditation, relaxation, and spirituality, and that they are all beneficial in reducing the effects of stress. What I'd like for us to do now is I have a few review questions, a few of those test yourself questions. So let's go through these. So let's get started. Ned has been told that he has a great sense of humor. He often remarks about how little he gets paid for teaching, how he wears sweatpants from 1986 to first dates, and that his mother abandoned him because he was an ugly baby. Ned's shtick would be considered what type of humor? Self-defeating, affiliative, self-enhancing, or aggressive? So if you don't know the answer, go back, take a look at your notes or in your book. We did cover this in an earlier video. So if you do know the answer, you think you do, you can just continue the video. If you chose self-defeating, you're right. What I think is most important about you knowing the types of humor is that self-defeating and aggressive styles of humor are associated with poorer mental health. When we think about humor, there are many benefits, but when our humor is directed towards ourselves in a negative way or towards others in a negative way, then this can have some negative mental health outcomes, and we don't get the benefits to our physical health like we would with much more positive types of humor. Let's look at another one. Which of the following remarks best demonstrates a clearly identified problem? Is it, I feel as though I can never get enough done? Is it, I'm so overworked that I don't have enough energy? Or I need to buy a planner to manage my time better? Or there are not enough hours in the day to get everything done? First of all, why is it important that our problems are clearly defined rather than vaguely defined? Think about the problem-solving strategies that we looked at and the steps to effective problem solving. And of course, the most important, or the first step, I should say, and if we don't follow this step, then the others aren't going to be very effective, is for us to clearly identify the problem. So which one of these is the most clear? If you selected, I need to buy a planner to manage my time better, this is a clearly identified problem. So we don't want our problems to be described vaguely. We don't want to use emotional descriptions instead of specific descriptions that are tied to the problem. Here's the next one. In order to be consistent with Herbert Benson's suggestions for effective practice of the relaxation response, which of the following should not be utilized? Should we be using a passive attitude, a soothing playlist, a comfortable position, or a mental device? Which of these are important? Which one should we not be utilizing? A mental device would be, remember, that repeated sound, word, or phrase. So which one of these is not included? If you chose a soothing playlist, you're right. We don't want to be listening to music. And again, I'd encourage you to find a YouTube video or helpful website that can guide you through this particular type of relaxation process. And I'll also put some information or a link for you on the supplementary videos or resources page for Chapter 4. Here's our next one. Research suggests that forgiving others, a blank-focused coping strategy, is related to adjustment and well-being. Now, this ties in what you just learned about forgiving, and it also ties into the coping or the problem-solving strategies that you learned about. So what type of strategy is this? Is it problem-focused, solution-focused, emotion-focused, or cognition? This is an emotion-focused coping strategy. We are dealing with our emotional response, how we feel. We're removing that hostility. We're trying to get rid of that anger and have a sense of peace. So the answer is emotion. Here's another. Robert was arrested for driving under the influence. After he worked through the frustration with himself, he was grateful that his carelessness did not hurt another or himself. He even came to realize that he was a problem drinker who needed help. Robert is demonstrating which type of coping. So if you're not sure, be sure to go back and look at your book. I'm not covering every single thing in our videos. I definitely need you to be sure to be reading your book so that you're having a nice, rich, full understanding of the concepts that you're learning. So which of these is this? If you chose meaning focused, you're correct. What he's doing is he's trying to find meaning in that experience. And he was actually able to do this. So he's recognizing through that stressful experience that he has a drinking problem and needs help. So he's finding meaning in that stressor. Here's another. Now, this one required you to have read in your textbook. So research by Troisi and Gabriel in 2011 on comfort foods found what? So I have a couple questions in here just to remind you to be reading your book and to be taking good notes from your book, just like you would for any on-campus class. And so what is the answer here? Is it that they do not help people reduce loneliness? They're ineffective for alleviating stress? They can help us engage in catharsis? Or they can remind us of meaningful relationships. So which of these is it? If you chose they can remind us of meaningful relationships, you're right. And so we do know that comfort foods actually can reduce some feelings of loneliness. And part of it is because of the reminder of meaningful relationships. Can they alleviate stress? In the short term, they can. They can make us feel better. And that's one of the problems with comfort foods is that we can become reliant on them. If we're experiencing chronic stressors, we may then chronically be seeking out unhealthy foods. And especially when we're stressed, remember we have a reduction in impulse control. It's harder for us to resist those unhealthy or undesirable behaviors. Here's another. According to Albert Ellis, problematic emotional reactions to stressful events are caused by what? So try to remember, what did Albert Ellis focus on? Did he focus on defense mechanisms? Did he say that stressful events are caused by logical reasoning? Are they caused by frustration? Or did he focus on catastrophic thinking, self-blame? Well, if as you looked at this, you chose catastrophic thinking, you're correct. So Albert Ellis focused on catastrophic thinking and suggests that we need to find more rational ways of thinking. And we've looked at that throughout this module and throughout, especially in chapter 4. So this is the end of our video. And if you have any questions as you're reviewing, please don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you online.